My name is Sadie Borushko, and today I'll be presenting a comparative analysis of dietary patterns and their environmental impacts. We'll explore how what we eat affects carbon emissions, land use, and water consumption across several common diets. Food systems are responsible for a significant share of global greenhouse gas emissions, as well as land and water use. As global population grows, these impacts only increase. Understanding how different diets contribute to environmental pressures helps us make more sustainable choices at both individual and societal levels. So the question is, how much does what we eat really matter? To compare diets fairly, I used a multi-criteria framework. This includes 3 key environmental indicators: carbon emissions, measured as CO2 equivalents, land use, which reflects how much land is required for food production, and water use, which includes irrigation and processing. Looking at all 3 gives us a more complete picture than focusing on just one. The diets analyzed include carnivore, standard American, gluten-free, pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan. The standard American diet includes a mix of meat, processed foods, and refined grains. The carnivore diet consists almost entirely of animal products. Gluten-free varies, but often relies on alternative grains and processed substitutes. Pescatarian excludes other meats, but includes fish. Vegetarianism excludes meat, but includes dairy and eggs. And veganism excludes all animal products entirely. Different foods have very different carbon footprints. Red meat, especially beef, has the highest emissions due to methane production and resource-intensive farming. For example, producing 1 kilogram of beef can emit many times more CO2 than producing the same amount of beans. Dairy also contributes significantly. In contrast, plant-based foods like legumes, grains, and vegetables generally have much lower emissions. Fish falls somewhere in between, depending on sourcing methods. For this comparison, several assumptions were made. These metrics are based on only one person's consumption for 1 year. Caloric intake, a daily 2,000 calories, is standardized across all diets to ensure fairness. Food sourcing is assumed to be typical rather than optimized, meaning not all food is locally or sustainably produced. These preconditions help create a consistent baseline for comparing environmental impacts. When we look at annual carbon emissions, the carnivore diet has the highest footprint by a large margin. The standard American diet is also relatively high due to frequent meat consumption. Gluten-free diets vary, but often align with standard diets. Pescatarian and vegetarian diets show moderate reductions, while the vegan diet consistently has the lowest carbon emissions. Water use is slightly more complex. Animal products, especially beef, require large amounts of water. However, some plant foods, like nuts, can also be water intensive. Overall, diets and animal products still tend to use more water than plant-based diets, with vegan and vegetarian diets generally having lower water footprints. Land use follows a similar pattern. Animal-based diets require significantly more land, largely due to the need for grazing and growing feed crops. Think about it this way. Raising animals requires land not just for the animals, but also to grow their feed. The carnivore diet uses the most land, followed by the standard American diet. Plant-based diets, especially vegan, require far less land, making them more efficient in terms of water use. And I think I showed this slide when I was talking about water use, but this is land use, and this is water use. When combining all 3 metrics, carbon, land, and water, we see a clear trend. Diets that rely heavily on animal products have the greatest environmental impact. Diets that shift toward plant-based foods consistently perform better across all categories, with vegan diets showing the lowest overall impact. One surprising insight is that not all plant-based diets are equal. For example, a heavily processed gluten-free diet may not be significantly better than a standard diet. Also, certain foods like cheese or farmed fish can have disproportionately high impacts within otherwise lower impact diets. You don't need to be vegan to make a difference. 1 to 2 days of plant-based meals a week makes a significant difference. It is so important to be aware of the environmental impacts of the foods that you eat. Individually, dietary changes may seem small, but collectively, they can have a massive impact. If large populations shift even slightly toward more plant-based diets, the reductions in emissions and resource use could be substantial on the global scale. One plate can lead to a ripple effect that even slightly reduces emissions, deforestation, and water stress. You don't have to completely change your diet to make a difference. Small steps like reducing red meat consumption, incorporating more plant-based meals, or choosing sustainably sourced foods can significantly lower your environmental footprint over time. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Even small, informed choices can add up to meaningful change. I'll end with this thought. One of the most irresponsible things we can do is eat in ignorance. Thank you.